Hello Dungeon Masters and players, it's DM Dango with another review from the DM's Guild. This time, we are looking at It Walks in the Jungle at Night. It Walks in the Jungle at Night is a Tomb of Annihilation adventure supplemented for players from 5th to 7th level or for players from 11th to 16th level. It's nice to see that the supplement allows for either of those two combinations, because there's a very high chance, based on the way the Tomb of Annihilation works, that your players will either be, as they're going into Homebrew for the first time, from 5th to 7th level, or perhaps you decide they finished Tomb of Annihilation and they want something to kind of get them to the next stage of thing, and an encounter as they're leaving Homebrew is a rather interesting concept. Now, I don't want to spoil too much about what the adventure entails, so I'm going to leave most of this stuff out of the video. However, I will go into some of the themes represented, and perhaps some of the things I liked, and some of the things I disliked. So, first off, the themes presented in this, it reads a lot like a Cthulhian adventure. There is this concept here that a creature is chasing. It is running through the jungle, and you don't know what it is or where it's coming from or where it originates from. The theory of horror and mystery and terror, that feeling you get in your stomach when everything in a room is exactly as it should be, but you still feel at unease. There's a really great Vsauce video on the 3 types of horror, and this definitely plays on that last concept. It's something I've seen tried before in D&D before, and to varying degrees of success. Playing a horror game in D&D is a very tricky concept. The very nature of the system doesn't necessarily lend itself well to it. However, I believe that this supplement does a very good job of presenting the best possible way to run this kind of mini adventure. It has contained within it 13 pages of encounters and things to do and ways of exploiting it. The rest of the 8 pages of adventure have to deal with there is a whole section on the lore, there is a whole section on the stat blocks for the various things that you need, and then there's a whole section on a small section on kind of mini encounters that can occur while the players are wandering through. It is a very good setup for an adventure in the later stages of the Tomb of Annihilation. Moving on to the myth itself, I really like it. It's really, really well written. And as a bonus, it does feel a lot like the other myths that are presented throughout the Tomb of Annihilation. These kinds of stories and the way they're kind of Aesop-y or fable-ish, that there is a thing that happens and a very man against nature, or trickster spirits, or that kind of thing. The themes presented here are very, very cohesive. One of the things I really liked, though, was the way it handles party decisions and party group mechanics, and the way that you can go through this module and the way it branches. It's nice to see a supplement where if you get a whole bunch of choices and presented from the players, it walks you through how each one of those might play out. And obviously it's never going to account for everything, but it's nice to see it covers the main bases. For most players, you're probably going to hit all the marks here, which means running this adventure is rather easy for a dungeon master. And I will probably include this in my Tomb of Annihilation game that I'm running this Sunday. Once my players get that far. I'm not throwing this thing right out at them. However, I might seed some of the rumors about it, and I like that as well. There is a whole host and section in what to do and how to get people prepared for it, and how to get players anticipating that this will occur, and that this thing that exists there has existed and is a legendary creature of darkness and evil. It's good to see that those kinds of considerations have been made, so that a DM can seed for future adventures, but then potentially just not decide to do it later. And then maybe your players are left wondering, oh yeah, what was that thing that we heard about? The ones that take the best notes generally do. They look back on it and go, that was weird. You never mentioned that again. But it's there, in case you ever want to bring it up again. There is definitely a heavy... So there is a number of things that I didn't like about this. When you got near to the end of the adventure supplement, it seemed to stop with the lore aspect of things. It seemed to stop kind of going into great detail on these things. It seemed to kind of peter out a bit, which is no fault of I don't think it's a major problem. The only other thing that I would mention is there's a mention point in explaining a component of the adventure, and then it's never addressed later on. It kind of goes into a detail about something that can happen or something that can occur, but never understands why. And this is also mentioned in the fable as well. Perhaps I'll reach out to the author, Alex, to see if he has some light to shed on it. Maybe he forgot about it halfway through. I know somewhat of how these things are written sometimes, and I've tried to write these themselves. You write things in batches or sections, and then come back to it later and forget to put in the mechanical components of it. Lore tends to come first for me, so I write the lore out, and then forget that, oh yeah, I forgot that thing was actually supposed to be weak to fire. Whoops. Due to the lore behind it. Although lore, like all things, and I think this is something DMs forget, lore is one of those things that gets passed down verbally, and as it gets passed down, people tend to change it, and things change. And I've actually had this happen recently with the Ring of Winter. A player asked, can he include it in his backstory? And he said, well, yeah, sure. And he said, well, what are its powers? And I said, well, you wouldn't know. It's a legendary item that is, by its very nature, difficult to track down or have any real reliable information. And so, well, I know some things from things I've read. Well, what have you read? And he went through a list of things that the Ring of Winter to. Some were right and some were wrong. Some were based on old Forgotten Realms books. And I said, well, I'm going to write you a list. And I have 10 items. Some of them might be true. Some of them might be false. All of them might be false, or all of them might be true. But I'm not going to tell you which. So I presented him this list, and he looked at it and went, well, I think some of those are true. I was like, yes, some of those might be true. But that was the point. That's the point of lore. It changes, immutable. It's odd. And that's part of the point of It Walks the Jungle at Night. The lore behind it might not be true. The things villagers tell you might not be true. But you have to trust it, because otherwise you're in the unknown. And that's what It Walks the Jungle at Night preys on. So in conclusion, what do I give this module? What kind of rating do I think it deserves or has earned? Well, I think it deals with those horror concepts I talked about before very well. I think it does the best job I've seen of any module so far, and I've actually looked at a couple in this area, partially because this area interests me and I always want to explore different themes within D&D that I ordinarily wouldn't. And also because I have a interest in this kind of horror. I've run games of Dread before, which is all based around this idea, and I had a lot of fun with it, and my players did too. They thought it was interesting and unique in the way Dread obviously has an extra mechanic that D&D doesn't. The tower scares you, the tower terrifies you. In D&D, the lack of terror kind of is lost a bit because the dice rolls are just so simplistic and they look more easy to deal with. But I think this module does a fairly good job of trying to get those points across and trying to bring that kind of horror and terror into the game. Now, for my actual rating, I think this is probably a 4 out of 5 rather than a full 5 stars, because of the bit I mentioned earlier about it's difficult to say exactly what I'm referring to without spoiling things, but there's a component to one of the creatures that I thought could have been expanded on or alluded to or made more clear in some of the bits. And there are some other interesting things where it felt like things were rushed near the end of the supplement rather than the beginning. Things like just didn't cohesive. It is still by no means a bad module. It just, there are things that would push it to the next level and make it a 5-star rather than the 4 that I've given it. Thank you. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Right now, smaller YouTubers such as myself are kind of under siege in a way. And you've probably heard about the monetization rules changing. Now, while I'm very, very small, I'm not going to be affected by this, and I have a good job. So, instead of asking you to like and subscribe my videos, why not go out and like and subscribe other videos? Help out those other small YouTubers who are just on the cusp. Anyways, thank you for watching. Peace out.